Sri Gaurang. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Padastamgare. Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi. Gauravani Vachani Visesa Sunyavadi Pasachalistarne. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 15, entitled The Pandavas Retire Timely. Text number 37. Yudhishtiras Tat Parisarpanam Buddha Pure Cha Rastre Cha Grihe Tadatmani Vibhavya Lobandrita Jama Hingsanadi Adharma Chakram Gamanaya Paryadat Yudhishthirastat Parisarpanam Buddha Yudhishthirastat Parisarpanam Buddha Pure Charastre Chagrihe Tadatmani Pure Charastre Chagrihe Tadatmani Vibhavya Lobhanrita Janma Hingsanadi Vibhavya Lobhanrita Janma Hingsanadi Adharma Chakram Gamanaya Paryadat Adharma Chakram Gamanaya Paryadat Yudhishtiras Tat Parisarpanam Buddha Pure Charastre Chagrihe Tadatmani Vibhavya Lobhanrita Janma Hingsanadi Adharma Chakram Gamanaya Paryadat Yudhishtiras Tapasarpanam Buddha Pure Charastre Chagrihe Tadatmani Vibhavya Lobhanrita Janma Hingsanadi Adharma Chakram Gamanaya Paryadat Yudhishtiras Tat Parisarpanam Buddha Pure Charastre Chagrihe Tadatmani Vibhavya Lobhamrita Janma Hingsanadi Ladies, Yudhistiras tat parisarpanang Buddha Purecharastree Chagrihe Tatmani. Yudhistira, Maharaj Yudhisthira, Tat, that, Parisarpanam, expansion, Buddha, thoroughly experienced, Pure, in the capital, Cha, as also, Rastre, in the state, Cha, and, Grihe, at home, Tata, as also, Atmani, in person, Vibhavya, observing, Lobha, avarice, Anrita, untruth, Jima, diplomacy, Hingsana Adi, violence, envy, Adharma, irreligion, Chakram, a vicious circle, Gamanaya, for departure, Paryadat, dressed himself accordingly. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Maharaj Yudhisthira was intelligent enough to understand the influence of the age of Kali, characterized by increasing avarice, falsehood, cheating, and violence throughout the capital, state, home, and among individuals. So he wisely prepared himself to leave home, and he dressed accordingly. Report. The present age is influenced by the specific qualities of Kali. Since the days of the battle of Kurukshetra, about 5,000 years ago, the influence of the age of Kali began manifesting. And from authentic scriptures it is learned that the age of Kali is still to run on for 427,000 years. The symptoms of the Kali Yuga, as mentioned above, namely avarice, falsehood, diplomacy, cheating, nepotism, violence, and all such things, are already in vogue. And no one can imagine what is going to happen gradually with further increase of the influence of Kali till the day of annihilation. We have already come to know that the influence of the age of Kali is meant for godless, so-called civilized man. Those who are under the protection of the Lord have nothing to fear from this horrible age. Maharaj Yudhisthira was a great devotee of the Lord, and there was no necessity of his being afraid of the age of Kali. But he preferred to retire from active household life and prepare himself to go back home, back to Godhead. The Pandavas are eternal companions of the Lord, and therefore they are more interested in the company of the Lord than anything else. Besides that, being an ideal king, Maharaj Yudhisthira wanted to retire just to set an example for others. As soon as there is some young fellow to look after the household affairs, one should at once retire from family life to uplift oneself to spiritual realization. One should not rot in the dark well of household life till one is dragged out by the will of Yamaraj. Modern politicians should take lessons from Maharaj Yudhisthira about voluntary retirement. from active life and should make room for the younger generation. Haribol. Also, retired old gentlemen should take lessons from him and leave home for spiritual realization before forcefully dragged away to meet death. Om Jnanatimidandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshunmanitam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Ugam Garudivachalam Pangam Langayate Garim Pitam Mande Sigunudinataranam Tanishwaram Paramananda Madhavam. So, the words of the Bhagavatam, whether it's Srila Prabhupada's purports or translations or the direct words of the other great personalities mentioned, are not wasted words, but they're based on wisdom and realization. And when we read here how Maharaj Yudhisthira was intelligent enough to understand the influence of the age of Kali, he immediately made some arrangement. Just as one is about to prepare for any business or any undertaking, one has to prepare himself. One has to prepare oneself. Not that you just immediately go into some project without thinking about it. Just like there's certain things that go on here in the temple, and Savas has to think about them. It's not that it's just, some magical moment that all of a sudden Krishna's, of course that happens also. The devotee is Saranam Hridayam Ayam, Saranam Hridayam Toham. Krishna is there in the heart and he's giving direction. But there has to be some preparation. And one has to be intelligent enough to see what's there in front of one's eyes. Here Maharaj Yudhisthira is observing the influences of the age of Kali. Kali Dosha Nidhe Rajan. The Bhagavatam describes that there's no shortage of faults in this age. There's no shortage. Actually, there's no height to the hypocrisy that's going on in the world now. There's no height. It just gets more and more every single day. Whether you listen to the politicians or not, whether you listen to the social climate or not, there's no end to the hypocrisy. It's such cheating and lying, and here is described, these characteristics are throughout the capital, state, home, and among individuals. It's so rampant that it would be foolish not to expect something to happen. Just like sometimes people say, oh, gee, I just never thought this would ever happen. Or this is so unexpected. Why? How could Uncle Bob ever die? Or how could this situation ever happen? But it's just obvious. The signs are there every single day. The signs are there every single day. One simply has to open one's eyes. And the Bhagavatam and the words of the pure devotee, as Srila Prabhupada is giving us here, are the ointment, as we were describing the other day. It is the ointment to clear away the difficulty that we're having. Just like someone may have, what's it called, WMD, wet macular degeneration. When there's fluid in the eye. It covers the the focus position of the eye in the inner inside the uh, cornea. It covers, and it's a blurred condition, water within the eye, and it's due to different reasons. There's age or some injury, some fluid gets in the eye, and the vision becomes blurred, eventually leading to a worse condition, even blindness. So uh, I think if anyone knows Karuna Avatar, he's suffering from that condition, wet macular degeneration, and it creates a very hazy condition. You can see form, but you can't see detail. So people may see so many things in this world, but they can't really see the details. Actually, they're seen, but they're not actually seen. In other words, they don't actually see what's going on in front of them, how the body is getting old and decrepit, and how so many things are just degrading in so many different ways. And here it's wonderfully described by Srila Prabhupada that the present age is influenced by the specific qualities of Kali. And each age, we understand from the Bhagavatam, has certain qualities, and certain things are degrading. What are those four pillars that are described? Truthfulness, austerity, mercy, and cleanliness. Excuse me? Cleanliness, right. So the last pillar is what? Truthfulness. The bull of religiosity, dharma, is teetering on one leg. Can you imagine? Try to stand on one leg for a little while, which is difficult. But can you imagine some large bull who's struggling to stay on that one foot? It's a terrible challenge. So this age is gradually right before our eyes. It's degrading in such a inconspicuous, but at the same time, very swift way. Here, Srila Prabhupada points out that the Vedic scriptures give us information how we've passed through so many years, but still we have, 427,000 more years. You can imagine how things will get to the point where there's just there's no good qualities whatsoever, just as the Bhagavatam again describes that a Kali Kali, or what is that? Chaitanya Charitamrita describes a Kali Kali Dharm. What is that? A Kali Kali ar Nayikona Dharm. Vaishnava Shastra e Kahe Marm. That in the Kali Yuga, there are no religious principles. People have no idea. It's totally beyond them. Just no understanding what religiosity means. It may be, so don't go to church, or put a sticker on, or give some poor soul a bag of food on Thanksgiving. Give them a dead carcass, right? They're so proud of it. The big famous people, whether it be politicians or athletes, big stars, they make a big show. They've gone to the homeless shelter and they're passing out carcass. Some carcass. And and they're glorified for it. And people make a big deal of it. But actually, there are no religious principles. There's only Vaishnavas and Vaishnava Shastra. Outside of the Vedic literatures, which are being given to us by the liberated souls, by the personality of Godhead, but through the liberated souls, there's nothing but that and Vaishnavas. Everyone else is, they're full of terrible qualities, as we're reading here, that that so much so that these qualities are in vogue. Prabhupada points out here, it's in vogue to be a cheater, a liar, a diplomat, practice nepotism. Oh, this is just like, Prabhupada wrote this so many years back, but this is describing the present day, this very day. So we can understand that this is always in, it's always current. Whatever we read in the Vedic literatures is actually current. It applies to the present moment. There's no such thing as it getting old or hackneyed or, well, it just doesn't mean too much anymore. We can just move on to something else. Let's create some other idea. No. Instead, Srila Prabhupada points out here that these qualities, they're again symptomatic of the age of Kali, but they're already in vogue. What to speak? We can hardly imagine what is going to happen gradually with the further increase of the age of Kali till the day of annihilation. We can't imagine. Of course, that's described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, how eventually the age gets so degraded, right? This age will be so degraded. Daseshu Prayeshu Rajasu is described that the kings, the leaders of society, they'll be nothing but thieves. And we can see that practically, asangskrita kriyahina, that in the guise of being leaders, these persons who have no purification, they've never engaged in any sort of spiritual work or regulative activities. So there's no purification, there's no practice, there's no idea of religious principles. And such persons, they'll be considered just barbarians. And it's a fact, we see that practically in society, that the leaders of the world nowadays are simply barbarians. They're full of terrible qualities. And they're directing people, misdirecting them in so many different ways, giving them so much misinformation, and cheating them in all sorts of ways. We have already come to know that the influence of the age of Kali is meant for godless, so-called civilized men. Right? That's why, again, the Vedic literatures describe that there's no religious principles, there's no spiritually minded people, there's only Vaishnavas and Vaishnava Shastras. Everything else is meant for uncivilized persons. Those who are under the protection of the Lord have nothing to fear, though, Srila Prabhupada points out here. And the Bhagavatam tells us, Samashitaye para plava plavam, that because the devotees are have taken shelter of the lotus feet, the boat of the lotus feet of the Lord, they're protected. They're protected, as Krishna says in the Bhagavatam, or in the Bhagavad Gita later on, that those who engage in devotional service, those who are have surrendered unto Him, they're protected. Therefore, they have no fear. again, as we mentioned, that Srila Prabhupada's words are not wasted. They're not idle conversation. But when Srila Prabhupada points out here that the devotees have nothing to fear from this horrible age, it is a fact. Because again, Krishna gives his promise that if we engage in the process of devotional service, that Krishna will protect one. And again, by Srila Prabhupada's personal example, we see that, how he dedicated his life to the spreading of Krishna consciousness. And we can see practically through the example of other great stalwart devotees of the Lord, Prahlad Maharaj. He surrendered completely to the protection of the Lord, and Lord Nrsingadev protected him. So, for the devotees of the Lord, as Prabhupada points out here, because they are under the protection of the Lord, they have nothing to fear from this horrible age, even though it's a very, very precarious condition. We don't know what will happen. And again, it's padam padam yad vibadam natesham. There's danger at every step. That is a fact. We're experiencing that every day. People are, again, oh, I didn't know this would happen. But again, the sign is there. That is the Kali Yuga. That is the age that we're living in. That everything we do is covered by some fault. It's tinged in some way. And that the only solution is to be engaged in the process of devotional service, whereby again even if one is in a very difficult condition, Narayana parak sarvena kutaschana bibyati, that even if one is in a very difficult situation, one is still fearless, and the Lord protects. Srila Prabhupada points out here that Maharaj Yudhisthira was a great devotee of the Lord, and there was no necessity of his being afraid of the age of Kali. Now, someone may ask or question why, because again, he was in the middle of a great battle, fighting so many stalwart warriors, just like we also may have different challenges in life. Sometimes it may be a health challenge, sometimes it may be a challenge that comes from the outside. So how is it that the devotees are not afraid of this situation? Holy Bhagavatam tells us, Marashraya katam rishta shindvanti katayanti cha. It's because the devotees are filled with thoughts of the Lord's pastimes and activities. Because the devotees are so absorbed in the pastimes of the Lord, focused on what the Lord is saying, what he's the wonderful pastimes that he's exhibited. One is so filled. The Bhagavatam describes one is so filled with these things that the devotee doesn't suffer these material miseries. He doesn't suffer from these material miseries. So instead, he preferred to retire from active household life and prepare himself to go back home, back to Godhead. Not to make some arrangement to stay here, which is the general tendency of the conditioned souls. We're making so many arrangements to stay here and make a comfortable situation, even though the next moment we know we'll be kicked out. Just like here, where in one of the buildings down the street here, there's some, on my balcony actually, there's some squirrels that live in a tree. And every time there's a gust of wind and rain comes through, it knocks everything out of the tree. But the very next day, the squirrels come back and they're again trying to make a nice little nest. It's 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 almost comical, and they peek their head out of the tree, make sure that nobody is aware of what they're doing. But all the while, they don't understand that as soon as uh, the wind blows again, as soon as the rainstorm comes in, everything will be washed away. So instead of making some arrangement to stay here, the great devotees, such as Maharaj Yudhisthira, instead they're making an arrangement to go back to Godhead. And Prabhupada points out here that the Pandavas were eternal companions of the Lord, therefore they were more interested in the company of the Lord than anything else. That there was no other, there was no greater interest. Of course, one has to perform one's duty, and that was exhibited by Maharaj Yudhisthira and so many other stalwart leaders. Quite the opposite, of course, of modern society, as Prabhupada points out here, that the politicians of the day and the leaders of the day, instead they're making all sorts of political and um, uh, behind the back arrangements to stay here and make some kind of comfortable situation by their cheating and their conniving. But instead, the devotee of the Lord is thinking, no, I don't want to stay here with all of this stuff. Instead, they're making arrangements to give up this material life before they're forcibly kicked out. So the devotees of the Lord instead of sitting in this condition which is described as a deep dark well, tat sadhu mani suravarya dehinam, this material world, it's like a deep dark well, where once having fallen inside, although you may cry out, no one hears you. You're sitting at the bottom of this well and waiting to be rescued, but it doesn't happen. So instead of staying in that sort of condition, one should instead uplift oneself, as Prabhupada points out here, to a spiritual realization. One should not rot in the deep dark well until one is dragged by the will of Yamaraj. Instead of being dragged by the Yamadutas, one should be uplifted by the Vishnu Dutas. That's our goal. Instead of being forcibly dragged out of this condition, it's like sometimes you see politicians. They're such a good example. They're in their office and they're so old that when they talk it makes no sense. They're so out of touch, clueless, and but by their cheating arrangements, of course, someone else is benefiting by their being there. They're helping someone else. It goes back and forth, all kinds of politicking. Instead of making way, as Prabhupada points out here, for the newer and younger generation, they simply sit in their seats and drag everyone down. It's it's beyond funny. It's beyond hilarious. It's just, I don't know what the word is. It's pathetic. It is. It's totally pathetic. And such individuals are leading the mass of people who don't know a thing. They're clueless. Just give them some intoxication, give them a little gratification, like the Romans' philosophy, right? Give them entertainment and bread, and that'll satisfy the masses. That was their philosophy. That's how they conquered wherever they conquered. Give them a little bit of entertainment. We'll have the gladiators fight and kill each other in front of all these dumb people, and then afterwards, give them a little bread. So instead of being dragged away forcibly, one should see the writing on the wall and make arrangements. So here, Maharaj Yudhisthira is setting such a wonderful example. And again, because he's engaged in devotional service, he has that intelligence. Otherwise, others are just covered by the Rajasa Tamasavrita. They're covered by ignorance and passion. Have no idea what they should be doing. Clueless. It's just incredible. So this is such a wonderful instruction and example, and one should meditate on it very seriously. So we'll end there. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, Prabhu. Such it tonight.
Thank you, Prabhu. This is a very, like you just said, such a wonderful example of King Yudhisthira realizing that he has to keep moving, he has to go on. And it's very easy to accept, to understand the comparison of him and his situation and ordinary politicians outside. It's very clear. Now, I was just wondering, will that be also applicable to religious organizations, and such as our organization, in which also we had experience and history of, gurus or GBCs or temple presidents, in which at one point they thought this cannot go on without my doing, and actually it's proven wrong because we are carrying on with our business. And such as recently we have the case of New York, that. So King Yudhisthira, of course, before leaving, he trained. He was happy to live in one sense when he saw that Parikshit Maharaj was there, and they put full attention in that child because he will grow up and he will rule the world. So isn't it that also, in one sense, for us to look after and see that we need to train up, or we have to pay attention to the new generations, because it can be dangerous, even in the name of spirituality, thinking that I'm doing the best thing. Some subtle attachment can be there and can be dangerous for that particular leader. And but in their doing, they're thinking I'm doing the best and there's no one better than me. But actually can be a damage also in that attachment and not allowing other people to grow. So I wondered if you could make a comment in that, if you can expand.
The examples are there. It's incumbent on the leader it's incumbent Guror nasasyat, Sojano nasasyat, Pita nasasyat, Janani nasasyat. We don't take any kind of position of authority unless we're prepared to teach our dependents. You shouldn't be there. If you're not qualified, if you're not prepared to teach your dependent in how to act and how to carry the ball, then you shouldn't be there. It's incumbent on the leaders to be conscious like that. Maharaj Yudhisthira was very conscious. He had a qualified successor. Srila Prabhupada spent years and years and years teaching and training, and it's incumbent on the followers to take it and execute it. So again, one should not be in such a position unless you're prepared to teach so that the program can continue. Otherwise, you should not be there.
Isn't it that also another thought came to my mind, that even Srila Prabhupada, while managing this large organization, and he was, in the beginning, he was dealing with so many issues with his disciples, Grihastas, he got fed up. And at one point, he just wanted to, delegate to his disciples, do this. It's spiritual, though, everything, but he said, I'm going to go more like in samadhi, in my own, like writing and things like that. So as you get older or you mature, there's other things that you can do too, like that.
Yeah, it's
But instead of becoming just too, like, I have to just do this, there's other things. There's room for more.
The Sankirtan movement's already been established by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's going to go on with or without us. We can be glorified by cooperating with it and doing what we need to do to execute it, or we can become an obstacle and slow everything down. So if one is having that confusion in life, then one should inquire from someone to approach an authority and get some advice. Either jump on the train or step aside. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.